Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Kristina Testa-Buzzee, and I am the current Interim Associate Dean of Extended Studies and Workforce Education and Director of Adult Learning at Norwalk Community College. And I mention those titles not to say, oh, look at how many titles and words and long my title is, but I think the work that I do and have been doing at NCC merges non-credit, student affairs, credit bearing, and which is really where I've worked for the last 25 years in higher ed. And so this opportunity, this presentation gives me an opportunity to start to merge my world. I've been in my new position about 8 months, thrilled that I have some colleagues from the non-credit division in the House, so thank you. And I'm very excited to do this, and it was kind of humorous. A couple months ago, we proposed to do these workshops, right? Anybody else presenting today? Great, wonderful. So you propose your workshop, and many of you have probably done this in other professional organizations, because you're really excited and passionate about a subject. You have a little bit of research, maybe a little bit of anecdotal data, hard data, and you want to do a deeper dive to present on it like 6 months out, right? Well, that's sort of what I did. Then when I started to look for research on non-credit students and student success, I had a big uh-oh moment because there's not much out there. Literally, there was a CCRC, Community College Research Center paper, published the end of last year that said there is no data that looks at student success of our non-credit students. And I said, okay, what am I going to be talking about? Well, there is some things to talk about, and I did find a great variety of resources, white papers. I felt like I went back to my dissertation life because I was looking for scholarly research, and there just wasn't any. But I think there will start to be, right? Because our non-credit students, at a flip of a switch, the loss of a job, the loss of a house, can become, our credit-bearing students with a flip of that switch, can become a non-credit student because they need a workforce credential and they need to get a job quickly. For some of our non-credit students, for whom that switch has already been flipped, they will start to be confident on a college campus, start to think, wow, I can do this. If I did this degree in 6 months, my God, what I could do in a year. And that could lead them to credit. So I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir, I'll ask that in a minute, but I really think this non-credit, credit student issue really needs to start to be addressed, especially at our community colleges and especially when we feed into credit four-year institutions. So that was really the passion that I brought to wanting to put this together. So out of curiosity, how many of you, I will be divisive for the moment, are in strictly or have one hat in non-credit? Anybody? Okay, in what, Housatonic? Yes? And Tunxus. Great. David, and remind me your first name again.
Joe.
Joe, we've met at previous conferences, so that's why I'm grateful that they're there. And I know, David, you wear hats in the credit side of the house, correct? Credit division or academic affairs, folks? If you can just give me an idea of what areas you're in or offices. I'm sorry, everything? Yes, Patricia, thank you. Okay, great. Great.
Academic deans of both credit and non-credit.
Absolutely. I think we've met before also. Great, wonderful. English, great. So in credit bearing. Biotechnology. Great.
Math.
Great. And Sue, my colleague, welcome and thank you for being here from Norwalk Community College and our foundation, whom I will speak highly of at the end of the speech about what we're doing. How about your folks? Tact Grant, near and dear to our heart, being this host institution as it winds down.
I'm credit faculty.
Great. Yeah, great. I think I have everybody. And thank you. What program are you studying out of curiosity?
Oh, theater.
Theater, wonderful, great.
Major.
Excellent, here at Housatonic, wonderful. Great. Well, thank you for being a part of here and helping. So that helps me a little bit. Oops. Okay, there we go. So, expectations. Do you have one word of what you wanted when you came today? What were you looking for? What were you thinking? Anything?
Offerings for students who are not successful in our classes.
Aha, can't get through. So,
Classes.
so maybe college isn't for everybody. Maybe. The first go around, or maybe initially. But I whisper that, right? Because we're institutions of education. We can't say that. Well, maybe we need to. so they can be successful. Okay. Okay, other thoughts, expectations? Mm-hmm.
Well, it'd be nice to hear something about low-cost marketing of non-credit programs.
Ah, interesting. We might be able to have maybe a sideline conversation about that. I'm not sure if I'll touch upon that, but doesn't mean there might not be some references to it.
I mean, I came also to hear just best practices in general.
Absolutely, no, but that's really important. That's the heart of what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
I came because I want to know what you're doing and how it links to funding.
Absolutely, great. Other expectations? We just wanted to see what it was about. Okay. What about your knowledge? Tell me things, I don't care if it's stereotypical or not, okay? Because stereotypes are sort of how we function as humans sometimes. It's what we do with them, it's the problem sometimes. What do you think of when you hear non-credit? Nobody thinks anything when they think non-credit.
Well, I think you already said it previously, which is
Right in there.
very quick, comprehensive, inexpensive, relatively inexpensive, short-term job credentialing for real jobs right now.
Real jobs now.
Real jobs right now.
Sounds like a reality show. All right. How about those of you that are in the credit or academic affairs side of the house? What do you think of when you hear non-credit?
I think of alternative. Much needed alternative.
Keep going. I didn't give you sticky notes because I figured you could be engaged.
I was worried about financial aid.
Absolutely. Money. Wish I had a green pen. Others.
They throw the word non in there, or not that kind of word, but you throw non in there, it's not worth something, it's not part of something. It is, but
But to some it might not be.
I think that it was good. Because a lot of our students go back and forth.
Absolutely. Have any of you in credit ever dug in, and I have a feeling, David, and you have, and if I am speaking at any point in something you want to jump in and give your experience as colleagues in the non-credit division, please do let me know. Have we ever looked at the data that when our non-credit, like of our certificate students, and I'll get to what that means in a minute, our non-credit students who also are credit bearing? Have you looked at that at your schools? What have you found?
Well, there's about, consensus there's about 200 or 300 that
Right.
it's probably a similar number. I mean, there are students who are registered in both.
Absolutely, absolutely. So financial aid may pay for some, but not for the others. And, you know, maybe if they're challenged in one class, which is the one that waivers, and, geez, they can't get a refund from non-credit, but financial aid, if they do it long enough and late enough, it won't hurt. Yeah, it's a challenge, right? And there is this, I was shocked when I got the reports recently. I don't have the numbers in my head yet. I'm not that much of a data geek just yet, but I was astounded at how many of our students were coded in other majors, not just general studies, not just other majors. And so it's interesting, and because of this workshop, I'm now anxious to get into that a little bit. Any other thoughts when you hear non-credit? Anybody think trade?
Yeah.
Trades? Okay. We didn't touch on sort of the two titles that sort of drive some of our coding, I say, in our credit bearing, workforce education versus lifestyle classes. So we all have those awesome Reiki, yoga, meditation teachers that come through us, and the wonderful students who engage on our campus and take those classes. Love them, because our divisions are about revenue generating. But I think it's also important that we start to, yes, we are revenue generating, and we're serving a student in a community need. It's not either or. So I do love our lifestyle classes. The heart of what I'm talking about when I'm referring to non-credit are our academic or workforce development programs. So does everybody understand what I mean by workforce education?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to mind that always seems to happen elsewhere in the South, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, these massive programs between major employers and community colleges to do non-credit training of work, you know, hardcore workforce development.
Huge.
I mean, my feeling is it's because that's where the jobs are, that's where the companies are. But one would think, since we still have some major employers in Connecticut, it would be nice to somehow do that same sort of thing here.
Yeah, organizations like Granger, where are they located? Anyone know?
Everywhere.
Their national headquarters? I was under the impression last I knew it was in Connecticut.
Might be hard.
Granger has amazing scholarship programs with our community college colleagues across the countries. They have a scholar program. So talk about funding opportunities, our business industry. But I'm in the same place you are. We don't have the staff, the resources to necessarily go out and knock on Granger's door and tell them how awesome we are. So that goes in maybe the parking lot of great work we want to do. But maybe if 5 colleges got together to do it, right? So exactly, there are some parts in the country where industry drives the community college workforce programs. Our industry in Connecticut, I don't think I need to tell you all, is very different. Very different. So, certificates, and we all know, right, that we give in non-credit certificates of completion, and many of those certificates can lead students to then sit for or take an industry-based exam. Shouldn't assume everyone knows that, but I'm sort of speaking from that. If I say something or make a reference to an acronym that nobody understands, please let me know. So, first I want to look at credentials and certificates nationally. And then locally, thanks to a colleague at Asnuntuck, she was able to share her presentation with me. So from a recent, this is literally non-scholarly, but I double-checked where we got some of his research. And this was from an article, and I have sources at the end that when you can access the PowerPoint through that portal they were talking about, you'll see it. But associate degrees over this time period of 12 years have gone up 47%. Long-term certificates have gone up about 67. Short-term certificates went up 157%. And that's with limited tracking, because our non-credit certificates fall off some of our radars in our national data sets. But that's pretty significant. Wouldn't it be great if this yielded more people over here for that bridge? Also, sorry, I'm trying to get used to the layout here. So how many of you are used to or familiar with Anthony Carnival's work in Georgetown University's Center for Workforce Education and Policy? Anybody familiar with them? If you care about non-credit certificate education and workforce, I highly encourage you to subscribe to some of their online programs and newsletters. And I don't know if anybody in the room tweets, but I am on Twitter, and I do try to tweet a lot about non-credit education and community college work. I'll give you my handle later if that applies to anybody in the room. So their report, they did a pretty intense research-driven report, 2012, that gave some of these statistics. Obviously, the top certificates, I think that's a no-brainer. Healthcare, business, office management, cosmetology, right? And some of our nonprofit, for-profit institutions capitalize on that. Do we? Is it academic enough? Ooh, did I say that out loud? Right? Maybe that's something that we need to look at. I don't know. When certificates lead to work in their related fields, again, a no-brainer, but I think an important observation, it leads to 37% higher income. And I contrast that against, and I'm not about to knock liberal arts, humanities, all right? I'm not about to knock that, but we often hear from our peers, maybe our friends, my son just graduated college with a degree in sociology. What is he going to do? No offense to sociologists here, there's plenty of jobs, but they're hard to find. So obviously, if you get a credential in healthcare and then go work in retail, you probably won't leverage that degree the same way that you could if you were working in healthcare. 1 million certificates awarded in 2010, up from 300,000 in 1994. 20% of our, this I thought was important. 20% of the certificate students in their data research went on to get an associate's, 13 a bachelor's. Now, that obviously doesn't take into account the numerous adults who come to our community colleges to retrain, re-educate, and start over. They already have a bachelor's. They might even have a master's. They certainly probably have credentials from another country. So this does look at, obviously, it isolates that population. Okay. So our own institution, and again, I apologize. I know some of my colleagues may have seen this, but I think this was eye-opening for me, having worked 7 years in academic affairs, credit side. So you can see that 3 in 10 of our students were actually non-credit students. I don't want to read the slide. You can see the reference. 48% of the students who were of the registrations were in workforce development and licensure courses. Yes, our lifestyle classes certainly generate a lot of seats in our registrations. 48% are in workforce development and licensure. I think there's room for growth there. We need to take a hard look at what we're offering, which is not easy, but I'm curious, for those of you that oversee non-credit or are involved, do you do program reviews or something comparative of your certificate programs on a regular basis?
We do, and I just would point out that our staff here at Housatonic would be like 90%, 95%.
Yeah, as would ours, yes. True. Very good point, actually. Thank you. This is system-wide, so clearly Norwalk also has a much higher, we're usually 56%, if not higher.
Workforce development for us is ESL.
Okay, sure, good point. And ESL does sometimes fall into this. Again, that's not necessarily the spot that I'm talking about. But for those of you in, in the non-credit, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So the question that I asked you, anybody else? Thoughts on the non-credit piece? Okay. All right. So 4,050 certificates. And there's a lot of conversation going on in the system, which I'm not even going to get into now, about capturing this data. We haven't always been, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if non-credit has always been good to ourselves in capturing some of this data. Some of you certainly have, and you've been at this longer than and I absolutely realize that. But I know that when I stepped into my new position, I had a lot of data to get my head around, but I had to actually make sure we were all coded and everything was captured, because these numbers do talk. Whether we like it or not, they talk. 4,000 certificates, and you can see the different breakdowns. And it really mimics a little bit of what the national certificate, top certificates are. So, and I say 4,050 students because, to me, what's critical is that this is all about students. And here we have a vet program at NCC, and I love this picture for a very specific reason. These two individuals did our vet assistant certificate in non-credit. This is our faculty member. Those are two clinical partners in veterinarian offices. She runs a veterinarian practice, had these two certificate students in clinical. They now work for her as a professional and are enrolling in our vet tech degree program. And their hours in their certificates lead to and contribute to their application for vet tech. Other sample examples of those kind of bridges, the buzzwords, pathways, any other examples from any colleagues in the college where your non-credit contributes to either admissions to a degree program or even counts as credit.
Well, one of the things that's happened here, and it's been put together by, excuse me, the folks in our TX grant, is students can get credit for non-credit programs.
Right.
So patient care technician carries like 6 credits. CNA carries, I believe, 4.
Right.
And so forth.
And those credits carry into as an elective in an associate's degree, or they count towards their requirements for health care.
I believe it's as an elective, I'm not familiar with it.
But it's better than nothing, and I'm not saying that it's better than nothing, right? It's a start.
Yeah.
It's a start.
And we also have students that may go from EMT into what we now have a degree paramedic program.
Yes.
Be right into that.
Yes, we refer our EMTs to you because we don't have that program.
I'm with Joe on this.
Yes.
The IT continuing ed courses are now, they just did an agreement with the credit side.
Excellent.
That they will be, as long as they pass the test, they will be counted as regular credit.
Right.
Excellent. That's a great resource.
And we have people on the IT credit side help with developing
Absolutely.
IT courses, which is, I can't stress how important.
Absolutely. I'm really closely examining any computer and IT classes we have in non-credit, and I've already tapped the chair of our computer science department. You're the expert. You're the pro in this. I've got to generate revenue, but I want to make it worthwhile. So how can we help you? Oh, and by the way, this is what we can do for you. So it is that conversation that goes back and forth. I may actually follow up with you about that because that is, I think, a really important thing. And I hope you get at least one nugget of information, one resource, maybe even a contact in this room, aside from the whole conference today, that can help you as you pursue or explore this topic. All right, so students, right? That's what it's about. So some of the research I identified, and also prior to my being in academic affairs, I spent about 18 years in student affairs. So I feel like I'm in such a great opportunity now to merge those two things, and it's exciting. Yes, I love my work. I am passionate. I wear that on my sleeve. Advantages of non-credit programs for students. We've already talked about some of them. The responsiveness is really, really important. When medical coding switched, so medical coding, ICD went up to 9. It all of a sudden was mandated that it had to be 10. You had to be certified to have 10. So we were able to put together a quick boot camp of medical coding ICD 10. I'll be really honest, because of lack of marketing, it didn't run, but we were responsive. We were responsive, and we're going to keep offering it until I'm convinced it's dead in the water. And I think we have already people enrolled for the summer, which we didn't last year, so that's a good thing. Persistence, right? Our students need to be persistent, as do all of us in higher ed. Cost, flexibility, short-term location. I think that's really important. Transition to credit, open enrollment. Now, the open enrollment piece, I'm sort of struggling with. I get my certificate coordinators who say my students are challenged with their English reading and writing and math and communicating. And then I'm giving them a certificate, and they're going to work, and they're not able to communicate at the level their employer wants. I'm struggling with that. I'm probably applying, and we do have for our phlebotomy, I'm drawing a blank on one of our other healthcare programs that you have to take a healthcare assessment test. We're actually moving to use the Accuplacer at a lowest level possible without it's a balance, right, of making sure our students still have that open access, but setting them up for success. Right? And it's a balance. It's not perfect. It's not worked out yet. But I think the open enrollment totally and absolutely points to the fact that we have, in non-credit, traditionally, not all, high-risk, high-need students. Does anyone know from just any other life that you might have the 7 or 8 top high-risk factors of students in higher ed that places them at risk? What do you think? Can you guess them? You probably guess them. Think of our students.
Underprepared and young.
Underprepared, young.
Economically disadvantaged.
Yes, those aren't what my research told me, but they're certainly valuable.
Economically disadvantaged.
Yep, low income.
I would say learning differences.
Again, not in the research. And this research is old. I'm going to absolutely say that. But I have yet to see new research that talks about the research-driven risk factors. It's low income, have a dependent, single, works part-time, full-time, works. I knew this was going to happen, and I realized I didn't write it down. I'm drawing a blank on the remaining of them. I will look it up as soon as this presentation is over. First generation is a part of it. There are additional risk factors that have definitely been identified. Everything that you're mentioning certainly is. A break in school. A break in school. And those are all, and interesting, a lot of that research draws upon those original, Horn, H-O-R-N was the original author of that. And all of that research draws upon that. So there's a lot of overlap. The point is our students tend to be at high risk. So here are some strategies that have been recommended. The Aspen Institute has a workforce strategies initiative that has some amazing information and resources on it. It doesn't cost us to read their reports, right? It's a good in-house professional development, I like to think of it. But these are some strategies that focus on non-traditional students, which typically are non-credit students from low-income working adults, traditionally, not all the time. Not all the time, I understand that, but it's the larger aggregate. If you combine the strengths of community college and our workforce nonprofits, well, I shouldn't say that. Many of us may be familiar with WIA, WIOA as it's being called, TAA, all these workforce programs that provide the funding, since there's no financial aid, for our non-credit students to seek certificates. Those kind of strengths working together are very helpful. Making sure that if they're, so rather than having one workforce development certificate in healthcare and one in business and have clusters of certificates, because then they can move through them. And ideally, if they're stackable, that would be important. Obviously, if there are the workforce development programs and certificates that we offer, give them workplace skills that compete for higher quality jobs. I'm going to skip this one for a minute, come back to it. Our students also need to understand how to navigate the labor market. Do your non-credit students, by a show of hands, do you think your non-credit students take advantage of your career service offices? Yes or no? Any yeses? Why is that? They do. Great.
Well, in our case, because once again,
yes.
the TAC grant,
absolutely.
we have a full-time person, and that's
right.
what he does. So
That's key.
When
for
he
those,
goes, who knows what happens?
well, that's right. That's a bigger issue. Exactly.
Well, as part of the grant, we do touch points, and we are constantly trying to reach the students via their email and
motivational support, counseling.
going into the grant.
Absolutely, it is right.
Make it sustainable throughout the college.
Right, folks. How hard is it for your non-credit lecturers to announce that they can use the career services on campus? How hard is that? But have we done that? I don't know. So you are going to leave today with actually a strategy checklist of things you can ask and maybe, I don't know, hopefully not ruffle feathers, but ask. Because I'm sure what we'll hear is we don't have enough resources to see our credit-bearing students. Do any of you card check students when they walk into your student support services? Do you say, are you non-credit? You can't come. Are you credit? You can come. Do any of us really do that? Or have we imposed that somehow? I'm maybe saying some things that are challenging folks. I don't know, challenge me back, I'd appreciate it. But have we self-imposed these restrictions on our students without realizing it? Right? So we've started communicating with our non-credit students via email, both their regular and many of them, because of the way that we collect registration information, we get personal emails. So they've given them to us. So we communicate with them. Career fair this week. And guess what? All of this, my telling our students about this, is driving a few more students into our career services. And now all of a sudden our career services is saying, hey, Kristina, I have this dental job. Can you get it to your coordinator? Heck yeah. 3 dental assistant jobs this week came across my desk, and they went right to my director of career services. I don't have the resources to manage that. That's what they do. They want the numbers of students and jobs. So it's a win-win. Same with the motivational support and counseling. You know, our WIA folks, the TACT grant, a lot of these folks get that support. How can we challenge ourselves to provide that same support to our non-credit students? Thank you. I think so it was 10 minutes, correct? Thank you. So what can we do, those of us in non-credit, and then those of us in credit, what can you do to make sure you know that your students, if they want to pursue us, if they're challenged in their dev ed classes, and they are desperately seeking confidence, finishing a non-credit certificate may just be the boost they need. I know all of you know this to some degree, of course, but then again, you're here, so I'm appreciative. So, and I was a real geek and brought some of the articles that I did pull from, if anybody wants to see them later. But what I have here, before I pass them out, I want to ask you. So it was the Aspen Institute's Workforce Strategies Initiative that shared some very specific activities that we can do on our campuses to support our non-credit student success. They sort of focus around these three areas. Now, educational support, we're an institution of higher education, right? Credit side does that all the time. The industry activities is where our particular niche of working with workforce programs is important. I want to speak to the financial aid piece of it, right? There are federal programs that will support non-credit student education. Right now, we do not, federal financial aid and Pell cannot be used in the state of Connecticut for non-credit certificates. Mott Community College, Patrick Henry Community College, some colleges in Florida. Their certificate students in workforce programs with an industry credential can use Pell. Let's catch up. What can we do? What can we ask? And I know it's not an easy question because when you get into FTEs, you get into, well, then is there less financial aid to go around to our credit-bearing students, which is our focus as an educational institution for degree completion. So what do we have to ask to promote some of these opportunities? So there are ways to do it. It does impact resources. It impacts Banner, which cracks me up that, what is Banner? A student software management system, right? That drives some of our decision making. I can't fight that battle. I can't. There's too many other things to choose from. But should Banner be driving how we serve our students? How do we find that right balance between dealing with what we're stuck with and challenging ourselves and providing more for our students? So educational activities. What do you think are some of the educational activities? And we've talked about some of them. Actually, no, let me, for time's sake, I want to give this out. Sorry. I do want to hear from you, but let me pass these out. And would you mind passing these out for me here? Thank you. So this is a handy-dandy checklist that you can take back to campus. All right. Oops. Can I have one? Thank you. All right. So what I want to point out on this is these support strategy activities, the middle, they may already be happening on your campus. So now am I saying you go back and do we have any deans of students in the room? So Patricia, I'm really not encouraging us to go back and say, so.
This is what I got to do, huh?
or probably at a harder conversation. I'm not saying go back to your director of counseling and saying, I'm going to send all of my students, I'm going to send all of our non-credit members, faculty, an email telling them that they should refer any students with mental health issues to our counseling program, because my director of counseling would shoot me. And I can understand that, because there are limited resources. But what are other ways that we can do it? Do we say to our faculty, if you have students with significant needs, there are these offices on campus. Don't give them a little, but don't spoon feed them. Because we don't want to overwhelm our resources, but we don't want to see our students struggle. And the same students who are our non-credit students today could be credit tomorrow and vice versa. And I think I go back to that circle that I started with. So as you take a look at this, do any strike you as outside the realm of possibility? Not sure what it means? Let's look at education first, the educational strategies. And I'm sorry, before I forgot, I did make reference to before, how many of you have a foundation at your community college? How many of them fund traditional scholarships? And that's pretty much all they focus on for students. Okay. I'm grateful, and I'm not just saying this because Sue is here, I'm grateful that at NCC, our foundation thinks about student success in a broad scope. They're opening themselves up to the possibility of scholarships for non-credit. We're exploring conversations with nonprofits who have funding for our students, but not WIA funding, because that's a nightmare. Less complicated, less bureaucratic. And so we're working with those nonprofits to try to figure out how can we give our students a voucher for payment because their organization is paying for the students' non-credit education, and thinking outside of the box, even though I had hoped that they weren't boxes because I thought it was kind of funny. This checklist has boxes. And I think this work, supporting our non-credit students, requires us to think outside the box. And if anybody's looking for a dissertation topic, I could just write the article now and have fun with it rather than the pain and duration of a dissertation. But if anybody is looking for a dissertation topic or working with young professionals in the field, this is ripe for a dissertation topic. Really important. Okay, I want to leave time for questions. Spoke at a pretty fast clip. Let me just. Sorry. I did want to share the sources that I had. And again, I'm hoping that you're coming away with one idea. Oh, the one idea that I found in this research, which I loved about motivational support, is a quotes bombardment. They actually, for students in some certain workforce classes, the faculty take the students' personal emails and they set them up on a daily basis to send them a motivational quote. No money, no resources, it's a simple email that you preset. I love that idea. It's just keep going, keep moving forward. Sometimes we need to be told those too, right? That's why we're here today. I think that's actually a good note for me to maybe close on, and that I'm very excited about what I saw some of the offerings are today. And this is a great opportunity for our PD, our professional development, right? We can't necessarily go here or there and everywhere, but if we can learn something from each other, I think it's really important. That being said, questions, comments, concerns, things that you wished I'd cover so that if I were ever to think of this again, I can add.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer, but are you aware of any schools or any schools who are doing or thinking about doing apprenticeship or internship programs in the non-credit area or in workforce development, where instead of a series of courses, the student actually getting hands-on experience for their whole, let's say, year.
Right. So it's the way that I think of it. It's to some degree internships and co-op on steroids to do an apprenticeship program. It's intense. It's not something that we traditionally think of. I know that some of my colleagues in the system, and those of you that are here may know more than I do, but I know that there was some funding identified for Connecticut schools to start apprenticeship models outside the range of what's been traditional. Healthcare, I know, help me out, who was?
Mark Stankiewicz, DOL.
Department of Labor is working with.
He's been down here, we've talked about
yes,
that.
So I think.
Healthcare, IT, manufacturing.
Yeah,
right.
healthcare and IT.
And manufacturing is sort of traditional. That's where a lot of apprenticeships programs around the country sort of started in. But the fact of IT and healthcare is new, and I know Connecticut is involved in that. So and it's interesting. I'm not sure if that comes under credit or non-credit. Do you know?
I think it was targeted for non-credit. I don't think it was limited.
Well, what we've talked to them about is the possibility of because remember, they're taking the old industrial apprenticeship model and they're trying to squeeze it on where it doesn't fit, right? But it's great. So what we're trying to do is, like, there's a pilot right now that they're working on with Danbury Hospital where CNAs can go in and become PCTs.
And I know Naugatuck is involved.
And that can work.
Right.
If they can pull that off.
Remember, one of the strategies is to make sure their occupations are clustered. That's an example. With that, very well could set a student up for great success.
And I can't let it not be said, there is one example of working with industry, and that's Middlesex. They do lineman training for Northeast Utilities.
Great.
Which is now called Eversource, but that is, that's a nice, I think, a wonderful point.
Are you with Middlesex?
Yeah, and that's actually now kind of morphed into, it's called Electric Power Pathway, which some of the other colleges are involved in too. So there's some online coursework through Bismarck State College. But then there's direct training through Eversource.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a real problem since it became Eversource. They've lost all the people that were really interested
in this work.
And so it's kind of like flattened out a little bit now, but we're waiting for that Eversource to calm down and decide what they're gonna do. You know, you got a lot of outlets in Massachusetts coming. And the people that were involved in the whole electric power are no longer there, so it's been problematic.
Their chief administrative officer is a graduate of our system, Southern,
There we go.
history major.
Interesting.
That's good to know.
Dave
Yes.
McHale, I hired him when I worked in HR.
Google research.
Utilities. Yep, CAO.
Thoughts, reflections, anything? Well, I know the PowerPoint will be available online through the process. I truly, truly, truly want your honest feedback on the evaluation. We're all educators, so we know good karma comes around. If you evaluate us, and then when you need it, they'll evaluate you all for good. I'm around for some questions if you have, if you're interested in any additional information. And I will expand my resource list. These were the ones that just, I took some resources from, quotes from, data from, but I will share the sort of bibliography that I pulled together. Thank you for coming here. I appreciate it. And I hope you leave with one nugget of information or idea or resource. Have a good afternoon. Thanks, Kristina.